Do you believe that the heaviest sumo wrestler of all time weighed almost 300 kilograms? What are the strongest sumo wrestlers on the planet capable of? How and why do sumo wrestlers get so huge? I will tell you about all this today in today's episode. Sumo is a much more interesting sport than you think. The most interesting thing about sumo is, of course, the sumo wrestlers, who cannot be confused with anyone else. When we think of a sumo wrestler, we think of a very large Japanese man with a mawashi belt, with giant arms, legs and, of course, a belly. In general, we imagine something like this sumo wrestler. These days, sumo wrestlers actually look like this. But did you know that this trend was not always the case? Until about the 20th century, sumo wrestlers were much more muscular and agile. Sumo wrestlers of the distant past looked almost identical to today's professional boxers or MMA fighters. By the way, even in our time there are sumo wrestlers who, by the standards of this martial art, are measured in miniature sizes. Perhaps the most famous of the skinny sumo wrestlers is the Czech Pavel Bojar, who competes under the Japanese name Takanayama Shuntaro. With a height of 185 centimeters and a weight of 90 to 100 kilograms, he was one of the lightest sumo wrestlers in our time. But here the question is different. Why are most politicians such giants? Why can't they follow the example of Pavel Boyarsky and look without excess weight? The fact is that in the professional scene there are no weight categories, so one of the determining and main factors is the weight of the wrestler. Almost all of the latest high ranks, with the exception of such a rare exception as Pavel, weigh more than 120 kilograms. Otherwise, achieving serious success is almost impossible. Try lifting a 150 kilogram mountain when you weigh about 80 or 90 kilograms. It is unlikely that with such weight one can emerge victorious from a fight. This is why sumo wrestlers strive to become bigger. Only now is this even possible. This is why they gain weight, and for this they have several methods, which I will tell you about now. How did sumo wrestlers become so great? On average, as already mentioned, they weigh from 120 to 130 kilograms. Although there are exceptions, because fighters weigh from 200, or even more than 200 kilograms. Let's see what they can do later. One way or another, almost all wrestlers choose their weight using a diet and a certain daily routine. To gain weight, sumo wrestlers need to follow a strict daily routine. The soldiers wake up as soon as the first rays of the sun appear. Immediately after washing, sumo wrestlers should begin training on an empty stomach, which can last from 4 to 6 hours. A wrestler must train without feeling sorry for himself. It sounds quite strange that they train for so many hours and even gain weight. After training, wrestlers take a hot bath, then eat according to their diet. On the one hand, the essence of the sumo diet is that they have no diet at all. There are no restrictions or prohibitions in their diet. The more high-calorie foods, the better. They have no prohibitions even on alcohol. Drinking alcohol among sumo wrestlers is considered absolutely normal. On the other hand, professional wrestlers eat the same diet as everyone else. Most athletes consume about 20,000 calories daily. To gain weight, many sumo wrestlers eat the sweet soup chankanebe. Essentially, it is a dish made from many ingredients. Ingredients typically include chicken, fish, tofu, and vegetables. The dish chankanebe is very rich in protein and is usually served in large quantities along with beer and rice to increase the amount of calories consumed. Immediately after eating they go to bed. The wrestlers should rest a little, because they will have another hard training ahead. Many sumo wrestlers sleep with oxygen masks on, which help them breathe easier after eating a large meal. After sleep, sumo wrestlers come to retrain, after which they eat again and go to bed. The next day everything repeats itself. This regime allows them to gain enormous weight, which helps sumo wrestlers on the wrestling grounds. True, there is a downside to all this. This diet is abnormal and has a detrimental effect on health. If we remember about alcohol, which sumo wrestlers are allowed to drink in any quantity, it becomes clear why the life expectancy of these wrestlers is about 10 years less than that of the average Japanese. They have to sacrifice a lot for their career. Now let's talk about their power and what they can do. Obviously, more mass gives more power. Sumo wrestlers have no problems with this. These fat guys are strong by default. But strength comes not only from weights, but also from very serious training. It may seem to many that sumo wrestlers are constantly thinking and fighting. But this is not true. Constant strict regimes, an insane diet, all this together makes sumo wrestlers extremely powerful athletes. Sumo wrestlers have very impressive bodies. The biceps and triceps of some sumo wrestlers are equal in volume to the leg circumference of a normal person, and even brown bears would envy their strength. Well, thanks to the crazy routine and strict regime, sumo wrestlers become psychologically stronger. A match between sumo wrestlers lasts only a few seconds, and during this time the wrestlers must demonstrate all their skills. A large sumo wrestler is able to withstand a collision with a giant like himself at a speed of 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. This is where the fight begins. This in itself is impressive, because an unprepared person will definitely receive fractures after such a collision. A sumo wrestler can also hook and throw a 150-kilogram opponent or push such a mountain out of the area. Agree that this requires incredible power. We should not forget that in just 10 seconds of a fight, sumo wrestlers are able to change their tactics several times, so they are strong not only in size, but also in brains. Still, in most cases in sumo it is the size that decides. The bigger the athlete, the better. Some sumo wrestlers accepted this postulate and decided to eat themselves to unrealistic sizes. Some of them succeeded, and they became among the champions in weight among all sumo wrestlers in history. The heaviest sumo wrestler of all time is Araro Satoshi, also known simply as Araro or Aurora. It's easy to assume he's from Japan. But no, the heaviest sumo wrestler of all time is Russian. A guy from Buryatia, Anatoly Makakhanov, performed under the Japanese name Araro. At its peak, Aurora weighed almost 293 kilograms. Just imagine how huge it is. Anatoly held the title of the largest active heavyweight in sumo for a couple of years. In 2017, he became the heaviest sumo fighter in the world. And in 2018, when his weight was at its peak, he confirmed this title. Although Aurora has retired, he is still the heaviest sumo wrestler of all time. As for the heaviest Japanese in sumo, he was and remains Yamato Ryuta. Weighing 277 kilograms, he was the heaviest sumo wrestler of Japanese descent and supposedly the heaviest ethnic Japanese in history. Yamato Yama ended his fighting career, but if Aurora did it of his own free will, the Japanese were forced by the Japanese Sumo Association. The huge heavyweight was carried away in fixed fights. Well, the place between Aurora and Yamamata Yama is occupied by an American from the Hawaiian islands of Saliva, Fwali, and Atisanu. He is ranked second in the list of heaviest sumo wrestlers. At his peak, the American weighed 285 kilograms. Kaneshiki was not distinguished by sophisticated technique. It was simple and reliable. Because of this gigantic size, the American was nicknamed a dump truck. The negative side of sumo. Huge dimensions and frantic strength are, of course, cool. But the life of sumo wrestlers also has negative sides. I have already spoken about one of them. This is a life expectancy that is 10 years lower than the statistical average. Another unpleasant thing for sumo wrestlers is that they are not allowed to drive a car. Not just because of the status. Everything is simpler. A huge belly can make it difficult to drive. Sumo wrestlers have many other limitations. In general, the availability of life's goods for them is determined by success. The level achieved by the wrestler determines what clothes and shoes can be worn, whether it is possible to use a mobile phone and the internet, whether it is possible to live outside the training camp, and so on. The same level determines the type and scope of economic responsibilities. The junior wrestlers get up before everyone else, clean and prepare food. It is believed that this arrangement creates a serious incentive. If you want to increase your status and not do menial work, then train and perform stronger. It doesn't have to be that bad after all. Hard training, frantic regimes, prohibitions. All this should be rewarded, right? And it is rewarded. The salaries of sumo wrestlers who successfully perform at a high level are very good. Wrestlers who reach the top rank can expect a monthly salary of $30,000 to $60,000. And all this does not take into account sponsorship payments that are provided after participation in competitions. Well, besides this, do not forget that sumo is a very popular form of martial arts in Japan. In the land of the rising sun, sumo wrestlers are respected and loved. The daily routine of some sumo wrestlers even includes such an item as communication with fans. So even though these wrestlers have to suffer from a difficult regime and an abnormal diet, this is all compensated by big money and people's love. Well, write in the comments how many seconds do you think you could hold out in the circle against the biggest sumo wrestler? And also, if you were interested, like and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss a new video.